what'd you say, a firefighting, goat raising, and CEOs have in common? And I was going to answer with agility.
Welcome, everybody, to another Executive Conversations discussion. And today I'm lucky to have an old friend who we worked together over 20 years ago in the performance management field and space. And it's Kevin Baum. And he's done some amazing things throughout his life. Some little known facts. He's the world record holder of the most push-ups in 1 minute. And I'll explain to why he used to be so fit. I taught him some things on the push-up front, I think, for sure. Anyways, no, I'm just joking. Kevin.
Watch it with used to be fit. I'm still fit.
So when I met Kevin, I was working for a company called Performance Soft that ultimately was bought by Actuate in the US. But we did performance management systems for senior executives in large organizations. And Kevin was on the speaking tour, having lived a very interesting life and understanding the importance of how very simple things can have a huge impact organizationally and societally. And I won't steal your story, Kevin, but Kevin also then went on to become a real practitioner in different levels of performance management, from the balanced scorecard to more robust systems, and has consulted with some of the largest and coolest organizations in the world, including Facebook, NASA, and the list goes on and on. I think it's now over 300. And Kevin's been helping to shape the future of these organizations, because as you know, we're in a bunch of flux right now. So towards the end of it, we'd love to talk a bit about, Kevin, your thoughts around AI and how organizations can leverage that and how they should be thinking about it from a performance management perspective as well, right? Because, we are definitely in, the innovator's dilemma. Like, all these companies are innovating from below, so we don't know who the winners are going to be. And there's also all sorts of laggards and, leaders when it comes to adoption curves. So this presents tons of organizational challenges for them. So anyways, love to get your thoughts there, but want to hear about the journey first, Kevin, and we'll stop and have a couple of breaks. But yeah, really thanks for showing up, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. It'll be a good one.
Thanks for having me, Danny. It's good to see you again. I'm glad we caught up with each other. So my journey has been interesting. I've been a strategy execution, performance data analytics consultant now for over 20 years. But as you know, that's not my background. My pedigree is actually public safety. I'm the former fire chief with the City of Austin, Texas Fire Department. It's the 10th largest fire department in the country. And when I was an executive there, Daniel, as you know, I was constantly vexed by my inability to get my hands on what I considered to be simple data. How many people are dying from fire in the city? Where are they dying? Under what circumstances? How did my firefighters perform? How did the building perform? What I thought were simple questions that we just didn't have data around it. So I took the fire department, eventually the entire city, through a process that I called managing for results. It's very similar to objectives and key results, which is what I specialize in now. We just didn't call it that. And our effort to truly reinvent government in 2001 was recognized by Baldrige for the highest achievement award in total quality. We're the only government organization to ever win that distinction, and that stands to this day. And because of that, several things happened to me. Number one, I got kind of spun off into the speaking circuit, and that's how you and I connected, because I had a lot of profound stories that I shared. And I went kind of on the circuit and shared those stories. And every time I'd share some of those stories, people come up to me and say, "Hey, man, can you come and help us do that?" And also Baldrige approached me and said, "Hey, you're good at this. Why don't you come work for us part-time? We'll fly you around the world, and you can parachute in on organizations and kind of stress test their practices against best practices and provide reports." And every time I did that, Daniel, somebody would say, "Hey, can you help us do it?" So it got where the 6 weeks I had a paid vacation for the city, I was spending every second of it on the road teaching, training, and consulting. And I finally decided, hey, I'm young, I'm going to do this. I left the fire service, and I've been consulting ever since. And as you said, I've had the true pleasure of working with every level of government: federal, city, county, state, you name it, all the branches of the military, a lot of those alphabet soup agencies. And on the private side, I've worked with everything from Silicon Valley startup 15 guys and gals with Series A funding and a good idea, all the way up to Fortune 10 companies and everything in between. So that's my journey, and I'm still on it. And you're right about the push-ups, but
yeah. So Kevin, the one thing that I loved about the story is how you actually took a simple data point that actually changed legislation and fire codes and had a huge impact on saving lives. And and in a lot of ways, I believe that's a catalyst where you began to understand how one simple thing, well understood, can have a massive impact on an organization, or in this case, almost society. Could you maybe drill into that story? I don't want to steal your thunder, but it's an
Oh,
amazing transformation that led, I believe, to your whole catalyst to become what you were and are.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's two signature stories. The one you're talking about is what I call the Freddie Finger story. So when I was the city's fire marshal, the assistant fire chief, the city of Austin had its worst year ever for recorded fire fatalities, people dying from fire in the city of Austin. If you extend that to 18 months, we lost 28 people. That's worse than a city the size of Manhattan. In public safety realm, you have what we call statistical anomalies. You have spike years. Same thing happens with crime. And historically, you're just hunker down. We can live through this. But if you're a data-driven organization, and I wanted to be, when those fire deaths started happening in such amazing numbers, I realized I've got to look into this. And so I conducted a series of meetings, and I'd like to talk to you later about kind of governance rituals around our disciplines with using data. But I started having these regular meetings to try and tease out what was happening. Long story short, we discovered that in every single case when somebody died from fire in their home, they died in the absence of a working smoke alarm. The smoke alarms were there. They didn't work. And we have very sophisticated forensics for how we know this. And I got to thinking, man, can that really be it? And so we started researching smoke alarms. What we discovered is smoke alarms have a shelf life. It's about 15 years. I'm not talking about the battery. I'm talking about the device and the technology in it. And we realized, oh my gosh, could we have hundreds of thousands of homes out there where people have that little fireman sitting on their ceiling thinking it's going to work for them, but when they have the fire, it doesn't work. So we're teasing out the data, trying to figure out what's happening. On Christmas Eve, in the span of 1 hour, we lost 4 people to fire. 3 of them were little boys, 2-story home, 3 smoke alarms, not a single one of them worked. And so I realized that, I was sitting on information that could save lives, but I have a mother and father sitting over there on the curb who just lost their sons. The last thing they want to hear me talk about is smoke alarms. But I felt, Danielle, I didn't have a choice. If you're mission driven, you don't have a choice. I had the data. I knew what was going on. So I've got 50 journalists around me. And all I talked about was smoke alarms, made it all the way up to national news. Long story short, because of what we learned, we were able to build this kind of private-public partnership around smoke alarm awareness. And we were able to take that trend from 28 in 18 months to 0 in 3 years. That is a world record for a size of city as the size of Austin. And when I realized I'm onto something, I published an article about it titled When an Inspector Calls, that was circulated around the world, translated in numerous different languages. That little guy that we built, his name is Freddie Finger. He's this little icon. He's got his finger in his hair. He is actually saving lives across planet Earth because of failure and what we did with that failure and what we learned from that failure. And that's something I'd like to talk to you about today. I have a chapter in my book called Sleeping with Failure. I tell my clients all the time, failure is not what's going to define you in your professional journey. What's going to define you is what you do about it when it happens on your watch. That's why we put the data there in the first place. The data is to force you to ask questions. The value in the measure is not in the measure, Daniel. It's in the questions it forces you to ask. And when you start asking those questions, it might be amazing what you learn. And so that's one of my signature stories. And that little guy is still saving lives to this day, Daniel. That's been over 20 years ago. It's pretty cool. And he's won several awards from U.S. Fire Administration and FEMA and several other institutions. So that's the story.
Awesome. So Kevin, talk to us about, along the way, you had some mentors, I'm sure, when you're at the fire service and when you're younger, and then you became this advocate, understand the impact of metrics and actually monitoring and actioning them. And, you've got to rub, elbows with some of the best thought leaders in the world around performance management on the speaking tours that you're at, the Kaplan, the Nortons of the world, the Mark Graham Browns, you name it. Who was your mentor and who changed you? And then you went into this transformation phase. I think you're working for this huge turnaround organization. And then you became this super practitioner in the balanced scorecard, and you've since moved on. So you continue to evolve. So I'd love to understand how you evolved, why, who had an impact. And, what was the difference in paradigm? Because, I in our pre-discussion, balanced scorecard is still alive and well. Everyone who takes their MBA still learns about the balanced scorecard and the impact. It is a really big organization thing. And your bio that's really interesting is you've consulted for really huge multi-billion-dollar organizations, but you've also consulted for some really cool Series A, B, and C, startup types. So, that's a really different mix of tools to help a small organization versus, a big balanced scorecard or a Baldrige program. I'd love to hear about the journey and, how you transformed your thoughts about performance management along the way.
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about the mentor first, because the very first question you asked is, who is your mentor? My mentor has always been my grandfather. Roy Basson. He was the president of the National Brewers Association, as in brewing beer. He actually knew Old Man Bush himself, as in Anheuser-Busch. But my grandfather taught me as a young man, plan your day, plan your week, plan your life, live the plan. But always keep your heart and your mind and your eyes open that the plan may need to change. And so what he was telling me is that it's the behavior that's important. Not so much the plan, but the goal-directed behavior that's important. And I have never forgotten that lesson. I live that lesson in everything I do. And, you know, Daniel, I have had the benefit of being around some very, very amazing thought leaders. And, you know, I've always been in search of that perfect mentor, that perfect leader, that perfect role model. And what I've discovered over the years, Daniel, is that perfection is an imperfect goal. And so what I have taught myself to do is be the role model that you seek. I tell myself that every morning when I wake up. Be the role model that you seek, rather than constantly searching the horizon for that perfect role model. Just identify what you think are the characters and qualities of a good role model, and you become that person. And so that's my challenge to myself every day. But now you also asked about kind of the evolution of strategy execution, which is my world. You know, back when you and I met, that was back in the TQM days, total quality management, and Baldrige, and back then we called it performance management. Which today, if you say performance management, people think performance appraisals. When you and I talked about it back then, it was data-driven decision-making. And then it went into the balanced scorecard, and I was heavily involved in that. And then that pivoted into what I call balanced scorecard light, and I was kind of a thought leader in that. And then now we're into OKRs, and everybody wants to know, where's it going next? And what I tell them is that at the end of the day, the red thread that links all of these frameworks, no matter what you call them. And it threads all of the most successful people and the most successful organizations on planet Earth, goes back to what my grandfather taught me. Plan your day, plan your week, plan your life, live the plan, but always keep your heart, mind, and eyes open that the plan may need to change. It's the behavior. It's goal-directed behavior and data-driven decision-making. And I don't care how complex the world out there becomes, because we are in a state of future shock right now, Daniel. And I'm not that old of a guy, but I remember when my dad brought a microwave oven home, and me and my brothers thought it came straight out of NASA. And today we're talking to the most profound intellect on planet Earth on our cell phones, which can talk to satellites in space. I mean, think about that. That's one lifetime. And so we're definitely in the quickening. And because of that, a lot of people are nervous. And AI is a big player in that. AI has a lot of executives nervous because we all know this is the wave. We have to get on it. This is the future. But we don't know what that future is going to look like. And we don't know what shore that wave is eventually going to land on, but we all know we need to be on it. And so if you think about it, Daniel, that's an incredible level of chaos to be making decisions in. We're all making decisions about AI, and I don't refer to it AI, by the way. I refer to it as RI, because I don't think there's anything artificial about it. We can talk about that if you want to, so I call it RI. But we all know that we have to incorporate and integrate it into our practices. We all don't know what that future is going to look like. And so that's a level of uncertainty that I think a lot of executives are not used to. But it's the new normal, because we're in the quickening. So if your thought, though, is where are we going next, there might be some rebranding of universal principles and management best practices. But at the end of the day, I don't think we can change it any more than what we've changed it. You know, one of the cool things about OKR, which is what I specialize in now, is we've boiled off all of that old top-down hierarchical executive push, you know, with those 60-page strategic plans with a 4-page mission statement that nobody reads except for the person that wrote it, with a 10-year goal, 6-year goals. We've truncated all that away. And we've gotten just to the work that matters most on a rapid cadence. Annual cadence for strategy, quarterly or trimester cadence for execution. Because the world around us is changing so quickly that we have the agility and the reflexes to change with it, right? And so that's why the current, if you will, iteration of goal setting and data-driven decision-making, which we call OKRs, is not going to go away. It will just be rebranded. Because I think that's the tool that we have to have in a world like the one that we live in today, which is just going to become more complex. That answer the question?
And I think, you know, one of our observations is we at Service Path, we follow like the V2 MUM model, you know, the Salesforce model. And, you know, just some really interesting observations from our part. The first couple of years we deployed it was really painful because going through it the first time is really, really hard, trying to understand like the vision and the alignment. But with AI, it's almost instant to build your V2 mum divisionally or group wise or team wise. You just the challenge is you have to read it, think about it, doesn't make sense. But to get like V2 mums in alignment from the top to the bottom of the organization is so easy now. And if people think this is hard, like they should be trying it, because to your whole point, like measuring, understanding the impact and the alignment of the things that you're doing. Because the one thing that I do, I still remember Mark's Graham Brown's term, vanity measures, so many people love vanity measures because they make them feel good, but they don't really help you run your business because they're always green and they're always good. So it's just like, but understanding, and also mixing it up, the ability to use your concept of, real intelligence, or I would call it, high degree probabilistic intelligence, because it's not sentient yet. So you get some good probabilities that might be interesting and useful, but that's how come like quality and reading the information that you get is so essential. Like I would argue in the era of AI now, the ability to double down and introspect your final results is more important than ever. Because the old process is you're getting it from someone you really trusted who will give that once over. The problem is like the changes between drafts, and if you've ever noticed it, we do a lot of content, and sometimes Malika and I are working, or Huda and I, or someone on the content team are working, and from V3 to V4, sometimes a hallucination catches and definitely transforms the entire asset with a totally wrong direction. So anyways, but incredibly powerful, super useful for performance management. But yes, I agree, Kevin, that really, really important. But one of the things I would love to maybe get your take on, because you're talking to all these organizations that are at different levels of maturity embracing AI, is these organizations have lots of legacy assets, like legacy systems, manufacturing lines that aren't integrated. What is your message to them, or what or thought to them for how do they begin to transform their organization and really focus on what matters? Because it's really similar to after World War II, Japan and Germany had no infrastructure, and in ways that was a huge advantage for them because they started with everything fresh. New companies coming to the fore now are in that very similar situation where older companies have this legacy debt scenario. So I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a mad dash into RI. I'm sure you've heard of the technological imperative. The technological imperative essentially asserts that if on a planet of 8 billion people, if someone can conceive of a thing, then it's almost statistically certain that somebody else has conceived of it. Therefore, if you're going to remain competitive, you must invent it to stay ahead of the competition. And this is what we're seeing in RI right now. AI is there's this mad run into everything AI. And I don't think there's a clear sense of where this dash is going to take us. And so what I tell my clients is you have to get on board, right? This is the future, but go slow to go fast. Start simply by getting started, because what you see is everybody today has got AI integration on their pitch deck, right, Daniel? And everybody's got it. Whether they really are doing it or not, everybody's promoting themselves that way, even in the consulting space, right? AI integrated OKR implementation, everybody's saying that. But I don't think people really know what that means, Daniel. I think people are just saying that because they're trying to be trendy and trying to identify and represent themselves as being truly AI integrated. And I don't think they are, because I don't think they know what that really looks like. And so people are still trying to experiment with that. A lot of my clients are building moated LLMs that they can use within the company so that their employees can actually access it and not, run the risk of privacy or, idea stealing, that kind of stuff. But even then, and I work with gigantic brands, Daniel, and just yesterday I was teaching a class on a huge global brand, and I said, how many of you are using AI daily in your business operations? And only 2 hands went up. And this is a Fortune 10 company. And I think it's because there's varying levels of comfort with it out there. There's a lot of levels of discomfort with it. There's a lot of people that just flat don't trust it. So I don't think people really know how to use it yet, Daniel. And I think that that's going to be part of the learning process. One of the things that I love and hate about RI is you can go to it right now and say, here's my business, here's our legacy systems, here's where we think we're struggling. Help build for me a roadmap on how I can integrate your capabilities into what we're doing. And it's going to provide that to you in less than 20 seconds. and it's going to be some great ideas. But the problem is, and I'm sure you've discovered this if you use RI a lot, and I do every day. I talk to it more than I talk to my wife. She's constantly giving me grief over that, is that it can data dump you with an enormous amount of information. And what happens very quickly is information overload. And so everybody says this is a great tool to inform human decision making. It is, but the downside is it can actually cripple human decision making because it throws too much at you too quickly. You probably remember when I was, on the speaking circuit, one of my famous lines was that if you go home and you ask your wife, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? She says, I don't know, where do you want to go? And the reason why is there's too many options out there. But if I come home and say, let's go for Mexican food or Thai food, she'll say, oh, Thai food. Well, Thai food or surf and turf. Oh, this Thai food. So it's Thai food. So when I give her two options to choose from, she's good at it. The problem with AI is it throws so much at you, Daniel. It can actually cripple your ability to make a key decision. And I think that's where we're going to have to find our balance on how we integrate.
Yeah, so you're in the trenches with some organizations that are learning, and I'm sure you're dealing with some that are really advanced. One of the things organizations that I'm talking to are struggling with is it's kind of very similar to, remember everyone used to have the fleet of cell phones and you were only allowed to use the corp company cell phone. Yeah. And then the whole concept of bring your own device came in. Like, I think we're at a point now where it's going to be, are we going to get to a point where it's bring your own AI, like your RI, right? Because one of the big challenges is, and I can't remember, you might remember the guy. I remember one of the guys from the Balanced Scorecard had this, he started off his presentation and there's all these really cute puppies on the slide. Do you remember this presentation? And the next slide is kill the puppies. and the puppies were all the cute experiments in an organization that were distracting and took away from the core mission. Anyways, I can't remember the guy I should get credit for, but I just remember that presentation. I'm going like, AI is kind of like that because now we're embracing it. And we have people like Malika and I are trying all the different models. The one thing we have cemented on is a really strong sort of organizational use procedural guide that everyone's agreed to, just because we do not want our customer data getting into these non-controlled AI tools. But, the shadow AI thing, it's reminding me of that kill the puppy slide. There's all these programs going on. How do you harness it and focus it now? I don't know if you have any best practices or how you would attack that from a performance management perspective.
Well, I don't think that those best practices exist yet, Daniel, or if they do, it's not available to us to read. There haven't been any white papers on it. I think that a lot of people are keeping that very close, right? But everybody is experimenting with it and exploring it because they know that this is where we need to go. And if you think, 2030 or 2035, what's the world going to look like by then? What jobs, human jobs, are going to be replaced by, RI? And you and I could speculate on that, including consultants, by the way, which is what I do, right? So that's something that we've given a lot of thought to. And then how is it going to speed up our ability to look at, assess, manage, and make decisions based on available data? I see RI as being this massive data crunching machine that provides good insights for us to augment decision making. So I see that as being a big role in the future, and it's going to lead to more of a quickening. Right now the pace, the rate, the scale of change is amazing. We truly live on a flat earth, not literally, but it's flat in terms of the competitive environment, the ecosystem we live in, and everybody are chasing what is going to be that ultimate integration of AI into business operations, and how's that going to fundamentally change what we do? And so I think the example that you gave before we actually started the podcast, what was the article? Was it Shopify? Where essentially
Toby from Shopify,
Yeah, talk about that for a second, because I think that's an interesting way to approach it, is that the very first question you ask yourself when you're making a decision is, could AI have a role in this? Is that accurate, Daniel?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a memo that Toby put out, or actually confirmed went out, I think on X, maybe 3 months ago. And it was just basically how they're taking an AI first mantra at Shopify and doing great experimentation. And before they make any decision now, it's just like, could AI do this when they're thinking about hiring? And so, and it's just like, get on board, get on the bus. Don't become an anchor, embrace this change and, and enhance yourself with it. I think, it was the real spirit of it. I mean, maybe not a lot of people south of the border, but Shopify's a big thing up in Canada. So
it's big down here. Well, I think I told you before we started the podcast that this was just a few weeks ago. I had a CEO and he had his entire leadership team in the boardroom. I was there virtually. And he stood up and looked at everybody and said, I want to tell all of you right now that artificial intelligence is not going to replace you. It's not going to take your job. And everybody's kind of smiling and nodding their heads. And he said, but I will replace you if you don't successfully integrate AI into the very fabric of the way you do business. And so the message that he was sending to all of his executives is, I don't know exactly how we're going to do this, but I want you focused on doing it. I want you to figure from wherever you sit in the organization, I want you to figure out what this is going to look like and how you're going to successfully integrate it into your operations. So it's forcing the conversation. And I see that across the board with my clients, Daniel, that CEOs realize this is where we're going. And either we get on board and figure out how to do it with our business, or we are going to be left behind. And that's why I call this the quickening, because I think as we continue to integrate more and more and more with our AI, they're going to see a significant change in the very fundamental makeup of our business ecosystem across the world. Now, if you were to ask me what that change is going to look like, I can't tell you. And I don't think anybody really can. We just know it's coming. And because of that, Daniel, there's a general, and I've worked with CEOs all across the world. Every single one of them is nervous about something, but they can't really tell you what it is. They can kind of talk around it. AI is part of that. Geopolitics is part of that, all that stuff. But they're nervous about something. And I think it is the AI effect. We all know that the world is facing probably the most significant technological shift maybe in the history of our species, but we don't know what the other side is going to look like. And because of that, there's a generalized uncertainty, anxiety out there. And then what happens when executives start feeling anxiety? Well, it's more centralized decision making. It's more command and control. And at a time when I think control is rapidly becoming an illusion, right? And so it's a time when we need more agility. But the human psychology is when you're nervous is you command and control. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So are you seeing that with your clients?
I mean, I'd say yes and no. So it's really interesting. So I listened, I don't know if you know, the All In podcast is pretty popular. And Chamath had a really cool, interesting insight. He has this company, I think it's called 80/20. And his whole thing is big enterprises are doing lots of pilots with AI. But the issue with the pilots is for a lot of enterprise systems or, mission critical systems, probabilistic outcomes are not exact enough to give any confidence. So these pilots are being frozen. And in our world, that's what our guys, because we do quotes and really custom configurations and give insight as to, what you need to think about investing in if you're going to sell this huge solution and a bunch of data there. But you can't have a 95% accurate quote. Right? Well, you can, but it could put you out of business very, very quickly and really dissatisfy a customer. And it can't work 95% of the time or 80%. Like the variance is all over for the stuff that we do because we do really complex configurations. But from what we're trying to do organizationally is we're thinking along the lines of two themes. One, trying to make everyone become this sort of AI native person, thinking about AI, like telling people to embrace these different tools, getting universal use cases out there. And then secondarily, from our technology perspective, we're trying to become AI native. So we've actually embedded AI in our stack that enables us to do a whole bunch of great, really cool things and build for the future. And, one of the big things about AI is really quick search. So we put these things called embeddings in the way we store our information in our tools and our assets that will enable all these really cool, clever things in the future. So we're still trying to figure that out. So, those were the two of the constructs. But the other thing, going back to performance management, when you push on one thing, there's some pressure somewhere else in the organization. And we're seeing it in very positive ways, but we haven't yet captured it. So, for example, we are now getting everyone organizationally to leverage AI to do create PRDs or, basically to help write requirements for a feature, for example, or to write test scripts. People's output and capacity has been lifted. Right. So, but at the same time, we haven't had the ability to create quick measurement tools to see how much lift are we getting in new story points or quality. Because for me, quality is the most important thing for a software provider. Is like everyone should be focusing on quality, and if you can get quality and velocity together, amazing things can begin to happen. So that's where we're trying to take AI and also learn about what our customers really, really need. Because I think one of the things you alluded to, there was a lot of stuff that happened in AI that missed the mark, right?
Yeah.
And now it's trying to figure out what hits the mark. So, where I'm trying to take this is, you are a pro about creating OKRs and understanding measures for impact. And you also, acknowledge just because it's red doesn't mean it's bad. It's a great learning opportunity to point you in the right direction. Do you have some specific areas that you think organizations need to be looking at to measure, to give some, baseline insight to help in this journey? Or what are your thoughts there?
As it relates to AI or in general?
AI, any kind of, can we learn from patterns of the past? Because this is just a big change management program, right? When you think about it.
Yeah.
So I would love your perspective there. And if you have a new variant, that would be cool.
Well, that's a really good question, Daniel. And I have not, in all of my work, seen anybody yet try to tackle measuring the effectiveness of AI in their operations, whether that's velocity or the quality of decision makings, et cetera. What I tell my clients all the time, and I tell myself, because I use AI ChatGPT daily, and I've even had conversations with them about this, is that AI, it should be man, woman plus machine, not man versus machine. And so if we use it correctly as a tool to augment decision making, to accelerate velocity or whatever it is we're trying to do, then we still have to have a human in the loop that we hold accountable, right? Meaning my fear is in 2030 that if you come to some manager and say, what happened? They say, well, that was the suggestion of our RI engine, not my fault. Then we're not using it correctly, right? There always has to be a human that's accountable for the decision that we're making with our RI companion or whatever that tool might be, that co-pilot. So there has to be a human in the loop. I like to refer, and I've had conversations with RI about this, that he refers to himself as the rising star. But he says that has to be complemented with compass, and the human is the compass. Meaning we are the ones that have to point it in the right direction and use it ethically and in the right way to help grow our business. But to the point of your question, is there a way to measure that? That'd be a fun challenge for us to kind of go down, Daniel, to see if there is a good way to measure how AI is improving our operations. I haven't seen it yet because it's too fresh, it's too new. Everybody's still in the process of integrating it.
Yeah.
But I'll give that some thought. There's probably a blog in that, Daniel. Let me give that some thought to think how we might actually.
I think along the lines, because our teams, and we have people in the organization who understand story points and at velocity of sprints. But I was wondering if there are new metrics that should be measured, because I just look at the old metrics and we're just saying, well, let's just increase the number because we should be getting 40% better or 50% better. Like, for example, we know in QA, certain tasks, we've had 10x improvements. Right. That's crazy, right? Like not like 1x, like the ability for them to do one thing 10x faster. It's just like, and it was something that would take a ton of time before.
There has to be a companion metric to that's quality.
Yeah.
Right? Because you might be 10x more effective or faster, but what happened to the quality of it? And one of the things, I'm sure you've heard about this, I got a lot of friends that are attorneys and I work with a lot of law firms. When they use RI for support on essentially researching cases, it will literally make cases up to support some argument, right? They're like pull them out of thin air. So it might really speed up the process, but you have to double check it. So, for example, I'm an expert on a huge wildfire that we had in Texas. I'm still a wildfire expert. I have my PhD in fire ecology. So I'm still doing expert testimony for several law firms. And the power of RI to my ability to do my homework, it's accelerated at least 10x. What used to take me 20 hours, I can now do easily in 2 hours. But I still have to go back, and I have to research all of the findings that RI has brought to me. Like here's the case law, here's the federal codes, here's the state codes that they're in violation of. I have to go and check them. And when I cross-check them, sometimes it's wrong. So and this is just a matter of debugging the tool. And I think by the time we get 2030, hopefully it will be fully debugged. But right now, quality is something that you have to be concerned about when you're using, AI. And that's why I tell all my clients, if you're going to use it, the human still has to be accountable. You can't blame it on the tool that you use to help you make that decision. It's still your decision.
You didn't even complain about any of the smoke we've been sending your way from Manitoba and our
You guys
wildfires.
need to me. I don't know what's going on up there in Canada with these.
I guess one of the challenges is trying to figure out how do they put tariffs on the smoke coming in. Maybe that's the big challenge. Not getting a lot of press.
They'll figure it out. What is starting those up there? Is it lightning?
I'm not close enough to. Probably. Actually, yeah, for sure, because they're starting in really remote areas, like where there's no people. So, yeah. I mean, that's a whole part of my background. I don't think you and I ever even talked about. No.
Yep.
Right. So Kevin, I love your story about how you got your insight about planning your life from your grandfather.
Yep.
So I just wanted to ask this really serious question. So at what age, when you're planning your life, did you know you're going to become like one of the best breeders of goats for goat yoga in the United States? Like, was that at 18 you had that vision, and that you would do this big corporate career, and then you would be like this great breeder of goats for goat yoga? Maybe talk to us about that. I'm sure that's therapeutic all on its own with your stressful life, but I'd love to hear a bit about that.
What's the old biblical saying? The race goes not to the swift or the battle to the strong, but time and chance happens to all. Dude, I would have never thought I would be into goats. So it's a funny story. My wife and I decided to move out of Austin when I became a consultant, because I can live anywhere so long as it's close to airport and internet. So we bought some land, 22 acres in the Texas Hill Country, and I'm a city boy, and so I'm learning a lot about this. And if you can get ag exemption through livestock, then you don't have to pay taxes on your land. And I'm like, well, what kind of livestock do we want to get into? I knew nothing about animals. And so a friend of mine said, well, why don't you get into goats? And so like, okay, and knew nothing about them. And so I bought 3 goats. I called them the Dixie Chicks, and they're all females. And and unknown to me, they were all pregnant. And so before my 3 became 10, and then that became 20 and 30. And I was like, oh my God, because they breed like rabbits. And so I'm like, what do I do with these goats? So I started looking around for places to sell them, and there's an outfit in Fredericksburg that focuses on goat yoga. I don't know if y'all do that in Canada.
Yeah, we do.
It's all the rage down here. And so you get all these people in this big warehouse, and I'll take my I got both pygmies and what are called Tennessee fainters. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Yeah. And we send them off, and they go, and they jump on people's backs when they're in downward dog, or they might faint and roll off and lay down on the ground. And what it does, I mean, if you want to make a bridge over to the consulting world, what it teaches us is that a culture of playfulness, of risk-taking, of just having fun. Because who would have thought? I mean, the most serious of yoga people will be in a pose, and the goat will jump on their back, and then suddenly they're laughing and playing with the goat. I mean, it's taught me a lot about just organizational culture, and that we need to not take ourselves so seriously. But a fainting goat, let me tell you what a fainting goat is, because I know Malika wants to know more about this. So a fainting goat doesn't really faint. What happens is when they get nervous, their legs seize up and they fall over. And they get nervous with the silliest of things. They could just be playing and one of them gets nervous and boom. Or a dog might bark and the whole herd just pulls. Or if people move quickly when they're doing a yoga pose, boom, it'll faint. But Dan, it is so funny to watch. We got some of the funniest videos out there of fainting goats. So who would have thought? That was never in my master plan, was to raise goats or goat yoga. But here I am, and I've got a bunch of them outside right now. So tell me that they want to come feed them.
I mean, that is so. I mean, one, it's just amazing. Like, I love animals, but I mean, you're actually spreading joy for hundreds, maybe thousands of yoga participants in the United States, which is incredible.
Well, and you know what I've learned from living in the country is that animals in general are a great source of tranquility. My wife and I had horses too for many years out here. And I would just go out, and I'm sure you've heard of horse therapy, where you just go and spend time in the presence of these beautiful big animals. I mean, this is this 1,200-pound animal that can feel when a fly lands on its back, and it's very intuitive. It can tell if you're out of sorts. It can, they can just empathic pick up on your mood and your spirit. They're just wonderful animals. Goats are the same way. So we've had cows, we've had donkeys, we've had goats, still have goats, horses and chickens. And so we've done the whole thing out here in the country, and we just love it. So, isn't that funny?
Just out of has, since you've become this more loving, caring man, and you were very loving and caring before, but has it changed your approach to the way you do your business with your clients and customers?
Well, as I've matured, Daniel, you said aged when you first saw me, but as I've grown up, I've softened a lot, in a lot of respects. The animals have certainly helped me in that journey, but I got to tell you though, Daniel, the remote world has brought out the best version of Kevin Baum, because back prior to COVID, when I was traveling 50 round trips a year all over the world, you're in a constant kind of chronic state of stress and anxiety. You're constantly looking at your watch, because I know I've got to get on a plane and go to the next gig, and I would fly into my clients and I would literally carpet bomb them with information and go to the next client gig. And so in the remote world, and I miss the handshakes, hugs, and happy hours, Daniel. I miss all that. But I am a much better, relaxed version of myself than I was when I was constantly traveling. And I think, in fact, I know, and I think my clients would tell you this, I provide a better value to them in this setting than I would if I was there. Because I can parse out our facilitations in 2-hour virtual meetings, give them time to reflect on it, to digest on it, to talk to people about it, formulate ideas about it, and then we come back and talk about it again. Whereas when I was in person, I would come out there and I'd spend 2 crash course days with the executive team, literally carpet bombing them, and boom, I'm gone. So I love the virtual environment. I know that's not what you were asking, but you were asking about the version of me. I'm a much softer, more easygoing, more patient, less stressed out version of myself in this environment than I was when I was constantly on the road. And I think my clients see that. What about you? Are you still traveling?
Not as much as I'm just happy I'm no longer, well, actually, no, I have status again, unfortunately. I used to be so proud of when, at the point in your career when I'm a 100K or whatever, flyer or whatever. And then, I can access all the clubs. And then I just got burned out like you. And I'm happy I got back to having status again, which, it's nice to go to the lounge for sure. But it's just it's the wrong metric to your point, right? It's about having an impact, helping the organization go in the right direction. But on that note, Kevin, I would love how, this is your how can you, if someone's interested in talking to you, what kind of programs can you help an organization with, and how can they engage with you? What sort of challenges are you helping your customers with today? Do they have to be on a performance management journey already? What's an ideal opportunity for you where you can add a ton of value to an organization?
Goal setting and data-driven decision making. I happen to be working under the umbrella right now of objectives and key results, which is a goal setting framework that helps you to link strategy to execution. But I'm experienced in numerous different frameworks, from the entrepreneurial operating system, which comes out of the book Traction by Gino Wickman, to the balanced scorecard, to TQM, to all those principles. But I've really been focused in OKR for the past 8 years. I like it, Daniel, because it's simple without being simplistic. It's easy to understand. That doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to implement. It's tricky to implement, and you've got to get those fundamentals correctly. But it's easy to understand. If the workforce can understand it, they can make it a reality. But I work with OKRstraining.com. We have several different programs. I have a certification program that's world-class. I've certified thousands, probably over 10,000 people from every single continent on the planet except for Antarctica in these principles and practices. And we've now incorporated AI as an element in the way we teach, because it's a great tool to help you formulate OKRs, but the way you cue it is crucial. In other words, the way you set it up and ask the questions is going to determine the quality of the OKRs that it spits back out at you. And so there's a way that we recommend that you do that. But anybody.
So on that note, so how do you? Because most organizations of the scale that you deal with already have a plan, and will have performance programs in place. So what does it look like when you go in? Do you do an audit of their process? What's their pain point when you come in?
Yeah. Well, they all have different pain points, right? And it's funny that you bring that up, Daniel, because that's one of the first questions that we ask them when they're looking to, kicking the tires on the consultant. What's the pain point? What's bleeding? And it all depends on, really the scale of the organization, because larger enterprise global brands have a very sophisticated strategy, sometimes too sophisticated, Daniel. And what the pain point might be, I've got this beautiful strategy. I don't know how to cascade it. I don't know how people to execute into it. I don't know how deep in the organization I should go, right? And so we'll share best practices with them and go in and we'll do an assessment to see essentially how they align with best practices and recommendations on how we could help. If you're looking for a primary pain point, it would probably be that I've got a beautiful strategy. I'm having a hard time executing around it. I've got people all over the world in a virtual environment right now, and I want to bring them together meaningfully to contribute to something. I want them to see how what they're working on contributes to a bigger picture, because I'm worried we don't have the same water cooler time that we used to have, the handshake, hugs, and happy hours. We don't have that anymore, or at least a lot of our clients don't. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world out there, and because of that, people are trying to build laser focus so that the organization is not focused on the change, but focused on where they want them to go. So there's a lot of pain points that brings people to us to get, support from what we do. But at the end of the day, Daniel, it's goal-directed behavior, data-driven decision-making. We help organizations build strategy based on a 3-year picture. It used to be a 5-year picture, but the world today changes too quickly. That 3-year picture then becomes the North Star, and then we build up annual cadence, strategic objectives, and key results, answers the question, but that's where we want to be in 3 years. Where do I have to be in 1 year? And then quarterly or trimester cadence, tactical OKRs in the organization that demonstrates how we're executing to our strategic intent. That's what we do. Now, there's a lot of nuances in that, and every organization is different. You mentioned that that I've worked with everything from startups to big enterprises. Daniel, I prefer the startups, where they're literally building.
Oh, hang on, no, I don't want to. I want to stop recording as well.
They're so busy in the business they don't have time to
So-
focus on the business, and so those are really fun companies and clients to work with, because you literally get to help them build the strategy. If somebody had a wow idea, and before they know it, they've got a business with no clear strategy and plan or any goal setting, framework or tool in place. So those are fun to work with. But we work with, the entire spectrum. And you can find me, by the way, just on LinkedIn, or you can email me at kbaum@okrstraining.com.
Yeah, we'll put it in the meeting notes and chat on.
Yeah, sure.
Thing. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Kevin, this has been awesome. So I'm going to challenge you to, I will do 5/8 of your push-up number. We'll have a competition. I just have to beat 5/8. I don't know if I can beat you one-on-one. Actually, I should be able to, because I think I'm a couple of years younger, but I have not had the life of training doing push-ups you have. Well, you said you did 78?
Yeah, so
recently?
I set the record 40 years ago this August. And the fire department called me and said, "Hey, how many do you think you can do now?" I'll just tell you how old I am, Daniel. I'm 62. And I said, "I don't know, but I've remained fit." And so I started working out hard. I was doing 400 push-ups a day, and I got up to just 79. I would like to call it 80, but I don't think the 80th would qualify.
Wow.
Which is not bad. I did 98 when I actually set the record.
In a minute.
There's a guy out of Africa that claims he's done over 100, but I saw the video of it, and it wasn't supervised and judged, and he cheated. So half of his push-ups
no bias at all.
wouldn't count.
He cheated for sure. He didn't beat the world champion.
But I mentioned to you too, because I did so many push-ups, and this is, I think, hilarious on age. I actually stress fractured my thumb on my left hand from doing so many push-ups. My wife's like, "That's what you get."
Okay, so maybe okay. Well, I'm still. So what's 5/8? If I get to 60, I think I beat you.
If you can do one per second, I'll be impressed. Dan.
1 per second.
So if you can crank out 60, a lot of people think that sounds easy. Once you pass 40, that's where the pain sets
No, but
in
a minute, that's like a minute is so fast. Anyways, we digress. But anyways, I will take this on. Malika's going to bug me for sure, I know, to see if I can get this done. But yeah, and we'll revisit this, and we'll love to have a follow-on conversation and maybe drill into some of your examples with some of your specific clients in the future, Kevin. But this has been amazing, and thanks for joining.